Now You Know BC is brought to you by Return It. Don't trash your empty beverage containers. Return them for the deposit refund.
Welcome to Now You Know BC. I'm Bob Kronbauer, also known as BC Bob. And on this show, I introduce you to interesting people, places to go, things to see, things that have happened in the past. You will hear our collective stories. This week, I'm talking all about big things in British Columbia, things that are large. From the remains of a lost pyramid on Okanagan Lake to a secret war train that ran out of Prince Rupert to obviously Mr. PG in Prince George, and more. As my friend, pro skateboarder Alex Chalmers has always said, go big or go home. Let's dig in. Did you know that a man once built an actual pyramid on an island on Okanagan Lake, then took over the Canadian embassy in Lebanon with AK-47s to try and get it back after the BC government basically stole it from him? And after all of this, he was still a free man? It's true. Eddie Haymore bought Rattlesnake Island in the 1970s and decided he was going to build a Middle Eastern theme park on it. Moroccan Shadoo is what he called it. And since there was no zoning on the island at that time, he could build whatever the heck he wanted. He started with a pyramid, then a giant camel that was going to be an ice cream stand where you'd order the ice cream from the head, then out of the back of it was a garbage can where people working from it would throw the trash out of its butt. The trash would fall. He also built an 18-hole mini golf course and was gonna build a submarine ride where people could go under the water and visit Ogopogo, but he was not able to complete his project. The provincial government of the day was not happy that he was trying to do this, so they ultimately ended up throwing him in a mental institute, Riverside in New Westminster, and while he was under duress, they then convinced him to sell the island to them. Then they amalgamated it into a nearby provincial park so he wouldn't be able to build his dream park on it. Nobody would ever be able to build anything on it ever again. After he was released from Riverside, he decided that he was going to go to Beirut, Lebanon with his cousins and hold people hostage at the Canadian embassy. He thought that would be the best way to get his island back. And for some reason, when he returned to Canada, he didn't get put in jail for doing that. Something to do with it being wartime over there, I don't really know. He did not serve any time for that or get arrested. Then he launched a court case against the government, which he won, and he didn't get the island back. But with the money that they had to pay him, he bought a hotel across from the island in Peachland. He built a giant statue of himself on the property, pointing over the water at the island. Eddie is currently retired and living in Edmonton, where he plays a lot of backgammon. The hotel doesn't operate anymore, and the pyramid has been taken down, but there's still remnants of stuff on Rattlesnake Island. Ruins, some might call them. If you want to learn more about Eddie Haymore, you can either read his ex-wife's book, Married to a Terrorist, or watch the feature-length documentary Eddie's Kingdom, which I co-produced and which offers a couple different sides of this bizarre story. Another wild story that involves guns. One of Canada's best-kept war secrets, the #1 armored train started running between Terrace and Prince Rupert in 1942 and was decommissioned in 1944. 200 soldiers worked on it. It was 8 cars long, 4 of which had massive guns attached to them, and it ran 150 kilometers a day with no real fixed schedule. It would just go back and forth, back and forth. And why did it do that? It was because Prince Rupert was a port that was used by the US military. The army saw it as a potential target. They feared the Japanese troops might attack at the port, then make their way up the Skeena River. The train never engaged in combat, as far as we know. It never fired those massive guns that were on it, but 3 people were killed by it. One was a dude who fell asleep on the tracks and got ran over. 2 others were railway workers, not soldiers, who were doing some work with jackhammers, and they didn't see it coming as jackhammers were too loud. Also World War II related. The livestock barns at the P&E grounds, where you go and see the chickens and the llamas and stuff, that building was converted into a sort of staging area where thousands of Japanese people were brought when the government said anyone who was Japanese couldn't live near or even be near the coast. Men were assigned from there to go to road camps and women and children to ghost town detention camps. These were located in the interior of BC and in the prairies. In the end, more than 21,000 Japanese folks were uprooted from their lives on the West Coast. Many had their land and other property, such as boats, taken away from them, never to be returned. In 2021, the PNE announced that they've committed to turning a portion of the livestock barns where the camp was into what's being called the Japanese-Canadian Interpretive Center to tell this story and others to the people of BC in one of the places that they happened. The idea is to educate people so that we can make sure nothing like this ever happens again. And now you know. Each week I show you an artifact that I think is an important part of BC's history. And today I've got an actual piece of the long-lost pyramid on Okanagan Lake that I told you about in the first segment. What me and my producers heard was that when they took the island away from Eddie Haymore and took down most of the stuff on it, they brought in a bulldozer and simply shoved the entire pyramid into the water on the west side of the island, between the island and the shore. It's about 100 meters across. But they didn't do that. As I was wandering around, I was being hyper vigilant about watching out for snakes, because they don't just call it Rattlesnake Island. There are snakes on this island. And at one point, I came across a huge mess of chicken wire and concrete, all balled up and discarded right to the east of where the pyramid once stood, not in the water, which you can still see the border of the pyramid too. It's made of cinder blocks. I stood there looking at this pile of crap for a minute and finally concluded that it was the exterior of the pyramid. I pried this little piece of concrete off of the rusted chicken wire and stuck it in my pocket, and I've had it ever since. The island is now a provincial park, and technically you're not supposed to remove anything from parks. If somebody wants to come find me and take this pyramid back, you can pry it from my cold. I'm just kidding. You can have it back if you want it. We're gonna go to break, and when we get back, Justin McElroy from CBC is gonna tell you all about his trip around the world. Welcome back to Now You Know BC. Today we're talking about big things in British Columbia. My guest is Justin McElroy, a municipal affairs reporter for CBC, not just any municipal affairs reporter, the municipal affairs reporter here at CBC in Vancouver, a couple blocks over from our studio. Justin just got back from a year-long adventure traveling the globe on a bit of a sabbatical, and he's seen and done some big things here and abroad. Thanks for joining me, Justin.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
What made you want to go on a year-long trip?
During late 2020, we're in deep pandemic. Everyone is doing their own version of what am I going to do when this is all over? What are my dreams? What do I want to do or see? And in the back of my head, I thought, well, traveling the world sounds amazing. And then I realized, oh wait, I could actually pull this off. I don't have kids or a partner or a mortgage or a pet, and my dad is in good health. And at CBC, you can take an unpaid year off if you want as well. And so I went, this sounds really cool. I'm going to spend 3 years planning to see if I can make it work. And somehow I did.
How many trains did you go on during your trip?
I went on 111 different train routes. Because it's a lovely way to see the world, it's a lovely place to see the geography. You also get guaranteed downtime then, where you can't really do anything for 4 or 5 hours other than enjoy the scenery. So you're able to relax, and it was such a great way of traveling, and it's such a shame that we don't really have in Canada and the US really great train systems.
I was going to ask you how you rank the SkyTrain after going on this trip, but it's like, it's not really a train.
No, well, and you know, the SkyTrain is really solid for intercity, within a city, rapid transit, right? But then you go to a place like Japan or cities in Europe where there's trains whizzing around at 200, 300 kilometers an hour going from place to place and cutting down. Imagine if you could get to Kelowna in like 90 minutes time,
oh,
right?
That would be amazing.
And so it makes you realize when you travel everywhere the things that your city and province are really good at and the things where maybe there are deficiencies compared to the rest of the world.
Did your tastes change? I followed you on Instagram, and every day you posted some amazing food. I didn't know you were a foodie.
I wasn't, like, I enjoy good food. And when you live in Vancouver, I'd always go lean into the strengths of a place where you live. And Vancouver has such great, authentic cuisine from so many places in the world that I was excited and impassioned to to go to, the core of these countries and actually see it on a broader scale. And so, one thing that was funny is going to places in India or Southeast Asia where spice is a giant thing. And they would look at me and say, so no spice? And I would go, no, I can deal with it. I live in Vancouver as part of it. But it was so fun to get to explore some of those things a little bit more, and just also the way that food is integrated into those cultures and into neighborhoods and into streets in ways that it just isn't in Vancouver.
Did you think about BC much while you were gone? And what did you learn about BC while you were gone?
Oh, I mean, you think about the place that you're from when other things remind you of it, right? So when I was in Bangkok, and their transit system is just like the SkyTrain, and I'm sitting in the front and looking out, that rings a bell. When I'm in London and there's a little concert playing in an industrial flat and Home for a Rest by Spirit of the West starts playing, obviously that makes your mind extremely excited. You see things along the way that spark those lovely moments. But at the same time, it was so fascinating because, I've spent a lot of time traveling around BC as you have, and I love and appreciate and know all of these different places. But now suddenly I was in places that were completely foreign to me, and I had no frame of reference. And so being able to feel like a stranger in a strange land for a year was a real blessing. And I'm just as excited to go back and go to places around this province that I know and love and have that feeling of familiarity again.
You're doing slideshows right now,
Yep.
and you wrote a ton while you were gone.
Yep.
Are you releasing a book with this stuff?
Yeah, so that's going to come out next year, we're going to. It's going to be about my year, and also examining the ways that after being everywhere else, how Vancouver matches up to the rest of the world, and BC matches up to the rest of the world. But otherwise, I'm excited to get back into the swing of talking about local politics and talking about cool things within British Columbia, and working on that on the side.
Cool. I hate to do this because it was so long ago.
Yes.
But in 2020, you did a bracket where roadside attractions were put head to head, and Mr. PG narrowly lost to
the goats on the roof in Coombs, Vancouver Island, near Port Alberni. And it was close, very close.
49.1% to 50.1%.
It was a squeaker, and the people in Prince George are still there's some controversy because they claim that I changed the closing time of the vote, and that if they had been given a couple more hours to ramp up their campaign, they could have pulled it over. Because at the beginning of the day, the goats on the roof dominated the entire competition. We're winning by large numbers. Mr. PG was doing well, obviously, because it won, but it was winning by smaller amounts. It defeated the giant Peach and Penticton in the quarterfinals by only like 58% or so. But over the course of the day, everyone in Prince George rallied for Mr. PG. The band Kiss rallied for Mr. PG.
Wow.
They put out a tweet saying, "We were in Prince George once and we loved Mr. PG. Vote for Mr. PG." But it just wasn't enough at the end of the day to get them over the line. But hey, in a province like BC, when you have so many amazing roadside attractions, being second out of 48 entries in there isn't half bad.
Thanks for joining me, Justin. We'll see you again. Welcome back to Now You Know BC. We're going to Nina on the street. She's talking to people about big things in BC.
I'm Nina Savage, and this is Street Survey. It's a big day, and we're here with the big birds in Olympic Village, talking to people about things that are big in BC. Who would you put on BC's Mount Rushmore?
I would... Oh my gosh, is this like a political question?
No.
My mother. I'll probably put like Nardwar. Yeah, that guy.
We had people say that.
Yeah, I like that guy.
I don't know why the first person that comes to mind is Nardwar.
Yeah, I think Ryan Gosling will be there. Probably I guess Ryan Reynolds.
Quanah Styles. Or Neapolitan, that's her name. She's like a trans artist, and she's like really known here in Vancouver.
Probably Terry Fox, honestly. I had to do his run every year. And I loved it too. So he played a big part in everybody's lives growing up too.
Michael Bublé is another kind of top contender.
You know where the twin lion heads are? I feel like we could do like 2 celebrities at least on there.
What is your favorite building in Vancouver?
One of my favorite buildings in Vancouver is downtown, the Dominion Building, right on, I guess, Hastings it is in Cambie.
Queen Elizabeth Park. There's a restaurant there with a great view.
I really like the view from Jericho Beach when you're sitting by the water and they have like a little place you can go out. Like there's benches and you can like look off into the distance. It's nice.
Polygon Gallery is one of my favorites. It's so beautifully designed. It's a photography gallery in North Vancouver.
And I don't know that I have a favorite, but I really like the old brick buildings. I'm originally from the East Coast, so I appreciate old.
I really love the Butterfly Project. I don't know why. It reminds me it's a newly developed building. I worked around it when I was on Burrard Tower too, but it kind of, I don't know why, but it reminds me of Miami whenever I look at it.
What has been the biggest event that's happened in BC in your lifetime?
Oh man, I've had a lot of lifetime.
Olympics. Then the riots happened.
That was big.
I love skiing. We have beautiful mountains up there.
Beautiful big mountains.
Big mountains, being in the mountains summer and winter. That's big for me. Maybe that's the biggest thing, and I love seeing the mountains.
Shout out to the atmospheric river that happened a couple years ago because climate change is real and happening. So that's probably the biggest event that I know of so far.
Keep all the concerts and creative experiences alive in Vancouver, because that's what helps us get through the harder times. That's what helps keep us grounded and keeps our spirits alive.
It's a big part of BC.
Big part of BC. It's got it all.
There are a lot of big things coming out of BC, and even on a rainy day like today, you guys shared some big ideas. This is Street Survey, and I'm Nina Savage.
We're going on a BC road trip to Prince George, the home of my favorite roadside attraction, Mr. PG. If you know one thing about this place, it's that they have a huge mascot that looks like he's made out of wood. He's actually made out of steel now. And before you even start driving north, you need to get this guy's name right, okay? So I was walking through the airport in Vancouver when I returned from a recent trip to PG, and I was carrying this guy. And I was wearing a sweatshirt that happened to have Mr. PG on it. More than one person pointed at me and said, "PG man." And I'm pretty sure they were referring to this guy, not me. Even though I was decked out in PG stuff and I also am a Mr. This guy's name is Mr. PG, not PG man. And he's the mascot of Prince George, and that's been his name for decades. He's found his home in various places over the years, and right now he lives at the junction of Highway 16 and Highway 97, and he's visible from rooms at the place that I always stay at when I'm in PG, and I'm not staying at my Grandma Rose's house. The Prestige Treasure Cove Resort is literally where Ice Cube stayed when he played in Prince George recently. He played a show there. This is the best place in town, as far as I know. Another place you want to check out is Daydream Donuts. Every town has a great donut shop, and this is the best one I've been to in PG. They make all sorts of custom cake and yeast donuts. The best ones are the ones that have candy on them. Tell them I sent you. If you're looking for drinks, you might be surprised to learn that there are a bunch of excellent craft breweries in town, as well as a couple cideries. Crossroads Brewery is just a hop from the donut shop, and they've got excellent beers. Around the corner is Trench Brewing, which is a gigantic, it's like a community hall where they hold trivia nights, other events. It's a great place for hijinks. And after you sober up, maybe the next day, head to the Exploration Place, the home of Prince George's Museum and Archives, dinosaurs, other stuff. Here, you're gonna learn about the colonial history of the area. You'll also learn stories about the Claytley Tenay people who used to have a village right on the very site of the museum. You'll learn about the history and the natural history, and you're gonna meet a bird named Loki. He's been there for 10 years. He's a magpie. He learned to speak like a parrot. He was rescued after a dog attacked the nest that he lived in, and he's been living there ever since. Lastly, there's a display at the museum that features me telling a story about the lost Mr. PG. Actually, not this one. He went on a trip around the world like Justin McElroy, but he wound up coming back with a cigarette in his mouth and a beer tap located under his kilt where his junk is. You'll have to visit the Exploration Place to hear me tell you that story on a video there. Enjoy your PG road trip. Welcome back. We're going to do a giveaway, but first, some more big things. Did you know that comedian John Candy starred in a pilot for a TV show in the 80s that never aired, so nobody ever saw it? A BC TV show. I went to Campbell River and tracked down a copy of it on VHS. The idea for Breakaway Outdoors with Terry and the Tiger was that broadcaster Terry David Mulligan, TDM as he's known, and former Vancouver Canucks player Tiger Williams would interview people while out fishing for salmon. When I asked Terry about the concept for the show, he told me that they figured they'd get the best, most candid interviews while they were out there on the water, peacefully enjoying this great BC pastime. The pair were friends with John Candy, who was not only a big fellow, but he was also a huge global celebrity at the time. That's why I'm telling you this story in the Big Things in BC episode. So somehow they convinced him to fly out to Campbell River on Vancouver Island and be the premier guest on the pilot for their fishing interview show. There's also been stories about VHS copies of this pilot floating around for years, but I could never find one in the past. Terry claimed that his was buried in storage every time I asked him about it, and I asked him about it a lot. I think he just liked the mystery of it being out there somewhere, something nobody would ever see. But eventually I found out that the owner of the resort they filmed it at had a copy, so I went over there and I met with him, watched it, dubbed a copy for myself. And in the years that have passed, someone uploaded it to YouTube. You think that it's me. It was absolutely not me, I promise you that. But you can look up the whole thing there. John Candy was hilarious in it, which is something you could just assume if you're a fan of his. He has some fantastic moments. He drops a ton of funny lines, and he's truly just a joy to watch. But I have to say, with advance apologies to TDM and Tiger Williams, this was one of the worst TV shows I have ever watched, and I'm sure they captured a ton of great interviews with John. A story could have been weaved together. It would have made a great premise to continue a series, but the storyline, the editing, they were a fever dream. Hard to follow. Sadly, it's no wonder it never got picked up, but what they did manage to put out there was a great story about the one that got away, as well as some stories that I can't tell on TV. Next time you're in Campbell River and you see a fisher who looks to be over 50 years old, maybe ask them about the time that John Candy came to town and partied with the locals. Those stories are legendary, and they're never gonna show up on YouTube. And now you know. I'm giving away a British Columbia t-shirt. This is the Big Things in BC episode, so of course it says British Columbia in big letters on the front of it, and you can only purchase this particular shirt from my online store. To enter to win it, sign up for my weekly newsletter on my store's website at bcbob.ca, where I will be randomly selecting a winner. That's the show for this week. Big thanks to Justin McElroy, Bob at Dolphins Resort, everybody at the Exploration Place, including Loki the Bird, Nina Savage and Derek Wong, and my editor Arav, everybody at CHEK, and lastly, thank you to my friend Macy and her friendly staff at Budgie's Burritos in Vancouver. For the last 20 years, they've been making some of the biggest and the best burritos in BC. I am currently the record holder for the most loyalty cards filled out. I buy lunch here a couple times a week. I'm getting these punch cards done all the time. I hope you learned something this week, and I hope that if you haven't yet, one day you'll get to see Mr. PG yourself in person. For more stories, you can follow me on Instagram. Just look up BC Bob and watch more episodes of this show for free on CHEK Plus. Check out my merch at bcbob.ca, and I'll see you next week when we'll explore more stories about this great province of ours. And now you know BC.
Now you know BC is brought to you by Return It. Don't trash your empty beverage containers, return them for the deposit refund.